I was 23 when my world shattered. Inside the mosque. The one place I thought was safe. But that day, the Imam, the man I trusted, he took everything from me. My voice, my dignity, my belief. I grew up in a devout Sunni Muslim family in northern Nigeria. It happened after Quran class. The other girls had gone home, their slippers scraping lightly against the marble floors as they left. I stayed behind to help clean, like I always did. It was my way of serving Allah. The Imam called out gently, like a father, "Stay a little longer. Please, I need help moving something." He was the voice we followed, the one who guided our hearts when they strayed. My own father bowed before him. We all did. So I followed him. He led me into the back room, one usually reserved for men. I hesitated. "Don't worry, you're helping the mosque. Allah sees your heart." That's what he said. The room was cold, smelled like dust and old books, and something else I couldn't place. He closed the door. I remember my heartbeat pounding in my ears. I remember the sound of the bolt sliding into place. I remember how his voice suddenly lost its softness. "Imam, what are we doing?" He didn't answer. He came closer. I took a step back, confused. He reached for my scarf. I gasped and tried to move, but his hands were already on me. He pressed his mouth against my ear and whispered, "Don't resist. This is a test from Allah." I froze. My brain stopped working. "This is a test." He said again. I couldn't scream. I couldn't move. My body belonged to me, but not that day. That day it belonged to him. And Allah, I thought. When it was over, I lay on the prayer mat, curled up, shaking. The same mat I had knelt on 100 times in worship now smelled like sweat and shame. My shame. He stood over me, adjusting his robes like nothing had happened. "Don't tell anyone," he said calmly. "This is between us and Allah. If you speak, you'll bring shame on your family. Do you want your father to die in disgrace?" I didn't answer. My voice was gone. I just nodded. I didn't even cry until I got home. And when I did, it wasn't sobbing. It was silent, choking tears that soaked through my pillow as I rocked myself in the dark. I couldn't pray. Not that night. Not after what happened. The same words I had recited since childhood tasted like ashes on my tongue. "Ya Allah," I whispered. Why? The next morning I bled. Not just my body, but my soul. My innocence died in that room, and so did my faith. I looked into the mirror and couldn't recognize myself. My eyes were hollow, my skin looked gray, my hijab felt like a chain. I wanted to rip it off, but I didn't. I still wore it because that's what good Muslim girls do. We obey, we stay silent. And I was silent for 3 more days. So I told my mother. We were in the kitchen, she was chopping onions. I said it quickly, like ripping off a bandage. "The Imam touched me." She stopped. The knife hovered in the air. Her eyes didn't widen. She didn't gasp. She just blinked slowly, like she hadn't heard me right. "What did you say?" I repeated it slower. This time, she slapped me hard, right across the face. I didn't flinch. She whispered through clenched teeth, "Astaghfirullah, don't ever say such things again. That man is a servant of Allah." I stood there, cheek burning, stomach churning, hoping she would look into my eyes and see that I wasn't lying, that I was her daughter, that I was in pain. She didn't. "You must have done something," she muttered. "You must have tempted him." And that was the moment I realized. She didn't see me as a victim. She saw me as the shame bearer, the curse. I walked to my room like a ghost. My father came home late that night. My mother must have told him. He didn't say a word to me. The next morning, he took my phone. That afternoon, he locked me in my room. That evening, I heard him praying loudly in the living room, weeping into his palms. "Ya Allah, remove this disgrace from my house." I wasn't the one who hurt anyone, but I was the disgrace. And somehow deep down, I still felt guilty. What if I had done something wrong? What if Allah really was testing me? What if I failed? I curled into myself and cried again. This time, I didn't ask Allah why. I stopped speaking to him altogether because I wasn't sure Allah was even listening. I didn't leave my room for 2 days, not to eat, not to pray, not to breathe properly. I just lay there, curled on my side like something dying in the dark. They brought me food. They knocked, but no one came in. And I didn't speak because what do you say when your mother thinks you seduced the Imam and your father would rather bury you than hear the truth? I wasn't just broken. I was erased. My father finally unlocked the door on the third day. He didn't even look at me. He said, "You will not bring shame into my house. Do you hear me?" I nodded. He said, "You will say nothing to anyone. No one will believe you. You think you're the first girl to cry wolf?" My mouth opened, but my throat tightened. I wanted to say, "I'm your daughter. Believe me." But he walked away before I could even form the words. That night, I heard my parents whispering. "She's been acting strange," my mother said. "Maybe it was just a dream or shaitan trying to confuse her. She needs discipline," my father said, "and prayer." The next morning, they took me to the local Sheikh, an older woman who counseled girls in the community. They told her I had become rebellious, that I was hearing things. I sat on the prayer mat, my scarf tied around my face, barely breathing. The Sheikh leaned forward and looked at me like I was a wild animal. "You know this is a test, right? From Allah. You must stay silent and endure. If you are innocent, He will reward you." I wanted to scream. Reward me for what? For being assaulted in His house? But I didn't say a word, because in our culture, silence is survival. I left that room with tears burning behind my eyes. Outside, I saw a group of young girls entering the same mosque. They were laughing, carefree. One of them looked just like me a year ago, naive, obedient, full of faith. And I wanted to grab her hand and say, "Don't go in there. You don't know what happens when the doors close," but I stayed quiet. That evening, my mother sat beside me and tried to act normal. She handed me a small glass of tea and said softly, "This life is full of trials. Even the wives of the Prophet were tested." I looked at her. "I didn't get a trial, Mama. I got destroyed." Her jaw tightened. "You will not speak like that. Allah sees everything. He knows what is best." I placed the glass down slowly. Then he saw what the Imam did, and he did nothing. Her hand trembled. I think, for a second, she almost believed me, but then she shook her head. "Maybe you misread his intentions. Maybe you misunderstood." I stood up. "No, I didn't misunderstand. He assaulted me, Mama, in the mosque, on the prayer mat." She slapped me again. Tears streamed down my face, but I didn't cover them this time. I let them fall. I wanted her to see. I wanted her to know what she was doing, but she turned away. "Do not ever repeat this lie. You will bring death to this house." My younger brother knocked on my door that evening. He didn't come in. He just slid a note under the door. It said, "People are talking. If you say anything, I'll deny that you're my sister." I held the note for a long time. My hands shook. He was 15, and he already knew how to protect the family's name better than its people. Later that night, I walked outside just to breathe. The sky was black, the stars dim. I whispered into the wind, "If you're there, show me, because I'm drowning." I didn't know who I was talking to anymore, Allah, the God of the Christians, nothing. I just knew that the God I'd been taught about didn't feel like a father. He felt like a judge who let men like the Imam walk free. I looked up and whispered again, "I can't do this anymore." And for the first time, I wondered what it would feel like to just disappear. But something deep in me, a flicker, barely there, refused to die. It was the smallest voice, but it said, "Keep going. Don't stop here. Don't give up." And I didn't. And I didn't know it yet, but that whisper wasn't mine. It was the beginning of a different voice, one I hadn't heard before, one that didn't sound like shame, one that would eventually call me by name. But for now, I just held on to the silence and waited for something, anything, that could save me from the wreckage of my faith and the ruins of my soul. Because if this was a test, I was already failing. And yet, somehow, I was still alive, still breathing. And I wasn't done asking questions. Some nights, I woke up sweating, fists clenched, throat raw from crying in my sleep. Other nights, I didn't sleep at all. I'd just lie there, staring at the ceiling, afraid that if I closed my eyes, I'd be back in that room, back in the mosque, back on the floor, back where everything in me was broken. One night, I sat down to read from the Mus'haf. I opened to Surah An-Nisa. I thought maybe I could find comfort. Maybe something would make sense. But instead, I found this. Men are in charge of women by right of what Allah has given one over the other. And those wives from whom you fear arrogance, advise them, then forsake them in bed, and finally, strike them. Surah An-Nisa 4:34. I read it again and again. My heart dropped into my stomach. Strike them. I got up and went to the bathroom, washed my face, and stared at the girl in the mirror again. And for the first time, I asked out loud, what if Islam isn't the truth? The question felt like a thunderclap in my chest. Not because I didn't want answers, but because I already knew how dangerous that question was. In my community, even asking meant apostasy. Doubt was treason, but I couldn't lie anymore, not to myself. So I started searching late at night when everyone was asleep. I went online. I typed things I never imagined I'd search in 1,000 years. Why do imams abuse women? Women's rights in Islam versus Christianity. Can I leave Islam? I clicked on forums, blogs, videos, anything that didn't feel like propaganda. At first, it was like stepping into a sandstorm. So many voices, so many opinions, so much anger. Some ex-Muslims were bitter, some were scared. Some had left faith entirely. But in the chaos, I found patterns. Stories like mine. Women who had been assaulted by religious leaders. Girls who were told, stay silent, Allah sees you. And the more I read, the less alone I felt. The shame that had been eating me alive started to loosen its grip. I remember one night, I found a YouTube video titled, Muslim Girl Finds Jesus After Trauma. I hesitated. I felt wrong, forbidden, but my finger clicked anyway. She looked like me, brown skin, scarf wrapped tight, tears in her eyes. And she told her story. How she had been abused by someone in the mosque, how she had cried out to Allah for help, but nothing changed. How one night she had a dream of a man in white who said, you are mine now. She said the name Jesus, and something in me stirred. It wasn't understood. It wasn't believable. It wasn't even hope. It was just a flicker, like a breeze in a dark room. I turned off the video before it ended. My hands were shaking. I was scared, not of her, not of the story, but of what had awakened in me. Because deep down, buried beneath years of Islamic teaching, was a part of me that always wondered, what if Jesus was more than a prophet? I had never dared to explore that question before. I was told Christians were misguided, that the Bible was corrupted, that Jesus didn't die on the cross, that he wasn't God. But why? Why did just hearing his name feel different? I returned to that same YouTube video. This time, I watched the whole thing. I don't know why, but when it ended, I scrolled down to the comments. There were hundreds, some calling her a liar, some quoting Quran verses against her, some calling her brave. And then one comment stopped me. It said, if you're reading this and feel trapped, Jesus sees you. I used to be Muslim too. Message me. You're not alone. The profile photo was simple, just a flower. The name was Grace in Darkness. I hesitated. My heart was racing, palms sweaty. But I clicked. I didn't have a fake account, just my real one, with my full name in Arabic. I stared at her profile. She had links to a blog, a contact form. I told myself I'd just look, that's all. But I didn't just look. I wrote. I typed out a short message. Hi, I don't know who you are, but I think I'm where you were. Please don't judge me. I'm scared. I hovered over the send button for a full 5 minutes. Then I pressed it and immediately panicked. What had I just done? What if she exposed me? What if she was pretending? Someone from my community setting a trap. But 2 days later, she replied, and her message felt like breath. Sister, I will never judge you. I was there too. Jesus saved me. Tell me your story when you're ready. She signed it, Leela. That name, so ordinary, so soft, and yet it felt like a door cracking open. I replied, I didn't tell her everything. I didn't tell her about the Imam. I just said I was raised devout, that something happened that broke me and I couldn't see God the same anymore. She didn't pray. She didn't quote verses or throw Bible references at me. She just asked me one question. Do you ever feel unloved by the God you were taught to serve? That word, unloved, hit me like a slap. Because yes, I did. I felt used, watched, and judged. I was always taught Allah was merciful but distant. He loved obedience, not me. He loved my submission, not my scars. Something changed after that. Leela started sending me one Bible verse a day. I told her I still wasn't sure about Christianity. She said, I'm not here to convert you. I'm just here so you know you're seen. That line stayed with me. Because after what the Imam did, I thought no one saw me. Not the mosque, not my parents, not Allah, but this stranger on the internet somehow did. And the more she shared about Jesus, the more I felt like someone was knocking on the door of my soul. One day, I asked her why she believed, what made her leave Islam. She sent me a voice note. She said, "Because when I met Jesus, I stopped trying to earn love. He gave it to me before I even changed." I cried listening to that, because I had spent my whole life trying to be enough, praying right, covering right, obeying, submitting, and none of it protected me. But this Jesus, this man who sat with sinners and touched lepers and protected broken women from being stoned, he sounded like the God I had always hoped for. She sent me a recording, and in it, I heard words that healed places I didn't even know were bleeding. She said, "Father, she doesn't even know your name yet, but you know hers. Show her you're safe. Let her feel you. Let her know you've always been there, in the dark room, in the mosque, in the silence. You never left. You never will." I replayed that prayer every night for a week, not because I believed yet, but because it made me feel less alone, like maybe, just maybe, there was a God who wasn't disgusted by me, a God who didn't call me filthy for being touched, a God who still wanted me. And slowly, something started to happen. Jesus. That name was never welcome in our home. It was the name of the others, the people who didn't pray right, who didn't fast in Ramadan, who worshipped a man. Infidels. That's what we were taught. But in my head, that name had become a refuge. It carried peace, a strange peace I couldn't explain. And with every Bible verse Leela sent me, I felt something pulling me deeper. Leela sent me a link to the Gospel of John in Arabic. I opened it. It began like this. "In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God." John 1 verse 1. It confused me, but I kept reading, and then I got to verse 14. "And the Word became flesh and dwelt among us." I froze. He dwelt among us. I wanted more, so I started sneaking time. I downloaded the Bible app but hid it in a folder labeled school. I started reading Psalms, then Luke. Every night after everyone was asleep, I would whisper his name, not with full belief, but with curiosity, with longing, and still with fear. One evening, my mother walked in while I was watching a sermon Leela had shared. I panicked and closed it fast. She didn't notice, but I could feel my heart racing for an hour afterward. That's when it hit me. Why was I hiding something that made me feel alive? Why was I terrified of the only name that made me feel clean? That night, I messaged Leela something I had never said before. I think I believe in him. I don't understand everything, but I believe Jesus is real. I believe he's not just a prophet. I think he's God. I don't know how, but my heart knows it. She didn't explode with excitement. She simply wrote, "He's been waiting for you. You've always been his." I broke. I sobbed into my pillow because somewhere in the depths of my soul, I knew it was true. I had spent years trying to be good enough for a God who always felt far away. But this Jesus didn't wait for me to climb toward him. He came down to me, into my trauma, into my pain, into my confusion, and he called me his. I whispered his name again that night, but this time with no fear. Jesus. And then I said something I never imagined I'd say. I looked up into the ceiling, as if into heaven itself, and said, "If you are who you say you are, I'm yours." It wasn't a fancy prayer, but it was my surrender, my moment. I still didn't have all the answers, but for the first time, I had peace. And peace had a name. Jesus. I thought I could keep it to myself, just a little secret between me and God. I believed quietly, prayed in silence, whispered Jesus' name only when no one was listening. But faith, real faith, doesn't stay hidden for long. It starts to show in your eyes, your voice, and your choices, and in a house like mine, change was dangerous. It began when I stopped waking up for Fajr prayer. My mother noticed. She didn't say anything at first, just gave me one of those long, suspicious stares across the kitchen table as she passed me the bread. Then she started asking questions. "Are you okay? Are you sick? Why are you so quiet these days?" I gave short answers, blamed school, said I was tired. But mothers know. They just know. One afternoon, I had just finished reading the book of Luke on my phone when I heard footsteps. My mother barged in without knocking. I jumped and threw my phone under the pillow. She narrowed her eyes. "What were you doing?" "Nothing, just texting." She stared at the pillow, then grabbed it. pulled the phone out, unlocked it with my thumb before I could even resist. And there it was, the Bible app, the chat with Leila, the sermon video. She didn't scream, she didn't speak. She just stood there frozen, like someone had poured acid down her throat. Then she slapped me, hard. My head jerked sideways and I could feel the sting crawl across my cheek. "You filthy girl," she shouted. "You're watching Christian garbage now? Is that what you've become?" I tried to explain, but the words wouldn't come. Not when she grabbed my scarf and pulled, yanking me to the floor. My brother came running into the room, confused. "What's happening?" She pointed at me like I was possessed. "She's been brainwashed. Look at her phone. She's become a kafir." My brother picked up the phone and scrolled. His face darkened. "You believe in Jesus now?" he asked. I couldn't lie. Not anymore. Not after everything I had seen and felt. I nodded, just once. One tiny movement of the head, but that nod shook the whole house. He roared and kicked my side, hard. "You've shamed us. You want to bring curses to this house?" I curled up, trying to protect myself as blows rained down. Words, fists, spit. That night, I slept on the floor outside my room. They locked the door from the inside so I couldn't go back in. The next day, my uncle came, the same uncle who had sent me to the Imam years ago. He didn't ask questions. He didn't even look surprised. He just walked in, stood above me where I sat on the floor and said, "You're worse than a prostitute." Then he spat on me. It hit my cheek, thick and warm. My mother stood behind him and said nothing. My father wasn't even told. He was away on business. They decided to handle it before he came back. That evening, they dragged me to the mosque, the same one, the same scent, the same dark corridor. I nearly passed out from panic. They pushed me into the Imam's office and locked the door behind me. I stood there trembling. He looked up slowly from his desk. His beard was longer now, his glasses thicker, but his eyes, same eyes, hungry, hollow, cold. He rose to his feet, came around the table and stared at me like I was trash. "So now you follow the cursed one. Now you believe he is God?" I didn't respond. He stepped closer. "You dishonor your family. You disgrace your father. You belong to no one now. No Muslim man will touch you. You are filth." I whispered, "I belong to Jesus." His face contorted, like I had spit acid in his face. He slapped me, then backhanded me. He shouted verses from the Quran, called me a blasphemer, a shameful creature, and then he grabbed me by the hair and shoved me to the ground. I thought he was going to do it again, to violate me again, like before, but he didn't. This time, he just stood over me and muttered curses. "You should be killed," he hissed. "If it were up to me, I would bury you right outside this mosque." When they finally opened the door and pulled me out, I couldn't walk straight. But I wasn't afraid anymore, not like before, not even when they took away my phone, deleted all my messages, and warned me never to speak of Jesus again. I didn't care because the worst had already happened and I was still here, still breathing, still his. I spent the next few weeks in silence. They forced me to attend every prayer. They made me fast, memorize, and obey. But something had changed. I wasn't there. Not really. My body was, but my heart was somewhere else, with him. In secret, I would whisper verses from the New Testament under my breath. While pretending to recite surahs while washing dishes, I'd hum Hamdulillah, but in my heart, I was singing Hallelujah. While wearing my hijab, I'd picture myself clothed in his righteousness. I wasn't pretending to be Muslim anymore. I was surviving. I wasn't afraid of hell anymore. I had lived through it already and come out the other side with scars and faith. The next day, I told Leila everything. I borrowed a neighbor's phone, sent one long message. She didn't respond right away, but that night, I received a voice note. It was a prayer. She was crying while she prayed. She called me sister. She called me brave. She called me his. And I wept because even in my loneliness, I wasn't alone. Not anymore. There was no real church nearby, only mosques and fear. One Sunday, pretending to go to the market, I followed a path Leila described. Behind a bakery, through 2 iron gates, over oil puddles, knocking 3 times on a rusted door. A hatch slid open, eyes studied me, then shut. My heart pounded. Moments later, a woman pulled me inside and locked the door. Dim light, damp concrete, candle wax, a broken couch, plastic chairs, a wooden cross. To me, it was heaven. A few people sat in a circle. Leila saw me and cried. We didn't hug, just locked eyes. You made it." A man with a torn Bible smiled warmly. "Welcome, sister," he said. "You're home now." And I broke. I fell to my knees right there because for the first time someone called me sister and meant it. We worshiped softly, just voices, hands raised, tears flowing. Pastor Daniel spoke about Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, how they refused to bow to the golden image, how they were thrown into the fire, and how there was a fourth man with them. I knew that fire. I'd lived it. And now I knew who the fourth man was. Jesus. Not just the God of the Bible, but the God who stood in the fire with girls like me. After the service, we all ate boiled rice and stew from a big shared pot. It was humble food, but it tasted like communion. I sat with Leela, holding her hand under the table. "We'll come again next week," she whispered, but I shook my head. "Number, I need more." She frowned. "What do you mean?" "I want to be baptized." Her eyes widened, and so did the pastor's when I told him. He didn't hesitate, just nodded slowly and said, "Then let's not wait." We couldn't do it in the open, too risky, so we planned it for the next day. Monday morning at sunrise, on the riverbank at the edge of town. I barely slept that night. I kept picturing going under and coming up new, free, whole, forgiven. At 5 a.m., I crept out of the house while my family was still asleep. I tied a scarf over my head, carrying my change of clothes in a nylon bag. Leela met me near the market road. We walked in silence, nerves in our throats. When we got to the river, Pastor Daniel was already there, and so were the others. They didn't ask me to share my story. They didn't make me repeat a prayer in front of them. They looked into my eyes and saw everything. I stepped into the river, the water cold against my skin, soaking my long skirt. Pastor Daniel placed one hand behind my back, the other over my forehead. He looked me in the eyes and whispered, "You were never forgotten, never rejected. Jesus has waited for this moment." Then he gently lowered me beneath the water. For a second, everything disappeared. No mosque, no fists, no screaming, no shame, just water and light and silence. Then I rose, soaking, shivering, laughing. The others clapped softly. Leela hugged me, both of us sobbing. No one said the word Christian, but I didn't need the label. I knew who I was now. I belonged to him. But I also knew what this meant. There was no going back, not ever. That same evening, something strange happened at home. My father returned from his business trip early. I didn't expect him until Friday, but he walked through the front gate just before sunset, looking tired and confused. At night, I was summoned. My mother, brother, uncle there. My father said, "Your mother says you've become a Christian," I said. "I believe in Jesus." He slammed the table. My uncle called it blasphemy. Then my father said, "You're no longer my daughter." They shoved my clothes into a bag and pushed me out into the dark. I froze. I looked at her. She didn't flinch. She looked proud. My voice cracked. "I believe in Jesus." His eyes watered. Then he slapped the table. "You dare bring shame to my house?" I stood still, didn't bow, didn't explain. I whispered, "Jesus saved me." My uncle stood up. "She's mad. This is blasphemy." But my father didn't speak. He walked to the window and stared into the night. When he finally turned, he said something I didn't expect. "You're no longer my daughter." Just like that, I was disowned, stripped of my name, my place, my blood. They threw my clothes into a nylon bag and pushed me out of the gate. It was almost midnight. The street was dark. I could hear dogs barking in the distance. My feet were bare, but I felt as if I had been waiting my whole life to finally lose everything and gain what truly mattered. I walked toward Leela's house, trembling but free. I knocked gently on her gate. When she opened it and saw me standing there, she didn't speak. She just held me like a sister, held me like a lifeline. The next day, her mother quietly gave me money and an address. That night, Leela walked me halfway to Mama Rejoice's small blue house. She had sheltered ex-Muslims for years. "Promise me you'll stay safe," she whispered, squeezing my hand. I nodded. "You too." Then I turned and walked into the dark. The house belonged to an elderly woman named Mama Rejoice. 3 days later, that afternoon, I left to buy bread and some sachets of water. The streets were mostly empty. I was almost at the shop when I saw 2 men leaning against a jeep. Their faces looked familiar. One of them stood up slowly, blocking my path. The other circled behind me. "You think we don't know?" the one in front said. His voice was flat, but his eyes burned. My legs went numb. I stepped back, but the one behind grabbed my scarf. "Judas," he spat. "You deserve death." I screamed, but no one came. They dragged me into the alley behind the pharmacy. One of them punched my stomach so hard I collapsed. My ears rang. I tasted blood. He pulled out a small blade and held it to my throat. "Say the Shahada," he said. "Return now." I tried to speak, but I couldn't. Tears filled my eyes, not because I was afraid to die, but because I didn't want to deny him. Not after everything. Not after all he had done for me. My lips trembled, but all I whispered was, "Jesus." The blade pressed deeper. "Say it, Jesus," I said again. That's when a bottle came flying from nowhere and smashed against the wall. The men turned, startled. A woman was screaming from a nearby house. A boy shouted, "Thieves!" In the chaos, they fled. I don't remember walking back, only collapsing at Mama Rejoice's doorstep, shaking like a leaf. She pulled me inside and locked the door. "Your family sent them," she said softly, wiping my bruises with a wet cloth. I nodded. I didn't need proof. I already knew. My father, my uncle, they had sent those men. That night, I decided I would never hide again. If they were going to kill me, they would kill me singing. They would kill me standing with a Bible in my hand. They would kill me in the name of the one who gave me life. And strangely, I felt peace. I felt more alive now than I had ever been. A week later, I returned to church. I shared my testimony: mosque, pain, vision, Jesus. Silence. Then Pastor Daniel walked up and laid his hand on my shoulder. "This is what grace looks like," he said, and I wept. That night, 3 more people came forward to receive Christ. One was a former Islamic teacher. One was a widow. One was a teenage boy who had been watching me every Sunday in silence. Threats continued. That same week, someone broke the church door and painted "Death to Infidels" on the walls. One night, I had a dream so real, I woke up crying. I stood in a desert. The sky above me was black, but the ground glowed red like coals in a fire. I stood barefoot and the sand burned my feet. All around me, people were crying, wailing, screaming for water. I saw familiar faces: my uncle, my old Quran teacher, even the Imam. They were all chained. Their eyes were empty. Their mouths moved but made no sound. Suddenly, a voice like thunder echoed in the sky, not angry, but heavy, like truth that couldn't be ignored. "You saw me," and still they did not believe. I looked up. Walking across the fire was Jesus. His white robe didn't burn. His feet didn't sink. He was shining, but not like fire, like peace, like a river in the middle of a war. He walked up to me and reached out his hand. "Do not fear," he said, "for I am with you." Then he touched my eyes. In that moment, I saw flashes: my father holding a knife, crying; my mother sitting alone, tearing her scarf; my younger brother kneeling, reading a Bible; and me, standing in a crowd, speaking not in fear, but in power. Then the dream faded. I woke up in a pool of sweat, my heart racing. It was the middle of the night. Mama Rejoice knocked softly on the door. She said she felt the Lord telling her to pray for me. When I told her the dream, she smiled. That wasn't just a dream, child. That was a calling. I didn't fully understand, but deep inside, something had shifted. I wasn't just a girl with a story anymore. I was someone God wanted to use, someone He was sending. But how? I was still hiding, still healing, still afraid. The next Sunday, something strange happened. A woman I had never seen before stood up during testimony time. She looked about 50, dressed like a market trader, head tied. She pointed at me. "I saw this girl in my dream," she said. She was preaching to women in hijabs and they were crying. Many dropped their veils and raised their hands. I froze. The room went quiet. I didn't know her. She didn't know me. But God was speaking. After service, she came to me and said, "Your mouth will set many free." I wept. The dream, the voice, now this. I went home and cried on the floor. "God, if this is you, I'm willing. But I'm still broken. I'm still scared." And He whispered something so soft I almost missed it. "You were never chosen because you were strong. You were chosen because you were willing." That night, I wrote my full testimony down for the first time. I wrote everything: the abuse, the shame, the mosque, the pain. But I also wrote about the vision, the freedom, the joy, the peace. I didn't plan to share it. I just wrote it as a way to heal. But Mama Rejoice read it without asking, and she printed 5 copies. The next week, a woman from the church took 1 copy to her sister who was still in Islam. 2 days later, the sister came to the house, eyes red from crying. "I want to know the Jesus that rescued you," she said. She gave her life to Christ right there on our plastic carpet. I hugged her like a sister, because she was. The floodgate had opened. Within a month, 7 women had come. Some were divorced, some were escaping forced marriages, some were students, but all of them broken in the same way I was, and all of them hungry for something real. I didn't feel like a leader. I still had nightmares. I still woke up shaking some nights. But the more I shared, the more healing came. Jesus wasn't just saving others. He was still saving me. 2 weeks later, I got news I never expected. The Imam had been removed from the mosque. There were rumors, whispers. More girls were coming forward. I should have felt satisfied, but instead, I felt sad. Sin destroys everyone, even the one doing it. I found out he was sick, very sick, hospitalized, and alone. No wife, no children, just a few angry boys who used to follow him, now ashamed. And again, the voice of Jesus came. "Go." "No," I said, standing in the small kitchen of our house. But again, "Go." It didn't make sense. Why would I visit the man who had hurt me the most? But something inside wouldn't let me rest. So I told Mama Rejoice. She prayed, then looked me in the eye. "If Jesus is sending you, then he'll walk in there with you." So I went. My hands were cold the whole drive. I almost told the bike man to turn back. But we got to the hospital, and I walked in. Room 206, private ward. I stood at the door for 5 minutes before I could turn the handle, but when I opened it, there he was, thin, pale, a shell of the man I remembered. He looked up, and his face changed. Shock, then guilt, then silence. "I don't want anything from you," I said. "I just came to tell you I forgive you." He looked away. Tears filled his eyes. "I remember," he said. "I see your face in my dreams every night." I stood there, shaking but strong. Not in myself, but in Jesus. "I don't hate you anymore," I said. "Jesus took it, and he can take yours too, if you let him." He broke right there on the bed. He wept like a child. I didn't touch him, but I prayed right there. "Jesus, do for him what you did for me." I don't know what happened after that. I never went back. But I left that room free, totally free. The past no longer owned me. The mosque didn't define me. The scars no longer controlled me. I was a new woman, whole, redeemed, forgiven, and forgiving. Now, I tell my story everywhere I go, from schools to homes to small churches, hiding in back rooms, not because I'm brave, but because Jesus lives in me. Some nights, I still wake up sweating, but then I remember the man in white, the fire that didn't burn me, the river that found me. I remember the girl I used to be, and the woman I've become. My name is not shame. My name is not victim. My name is loved, chosen, free. And if Jesus can reach into a dark mosque and rescue a girl no one believed, he can rescue anyone, even you.